Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Planning Committee. Just a few remarks before we turn to the agenda. This is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decision is made ahead of the meeting. Members of the City Council sit here as representatives of the whole council, not as ward members, and we do not enjoy parliamentary privilege for the proceedings of this meeting. We do have speakers today on a couple of items. We allow 3 minutes for objectors on each item in total and 3 minutes in support. This is not to make your entire case on an item, which you will already have submitted and which will be reflected in the report and updates, but to draw out the most relevant points on the applications before us today. Turning then to the agenda, this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site. The web link is a string of letters and numbers, so I would recommend that you go to YouTube and look for BCC meetings. Members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items, of which I don't expect us to have any today. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's the standard declaration of interest paragraph that applies to all Birmingham City Council meetings. In addition, you may see or hear members leave the room for a particular item because they have previously expressed a view, not in debate in the meeting, but previously in relation to any particular application, and I've already got notification that Councillor Johnson-White will be withdrawing for item 11, having previously expressed a view. If it occurs to you as we go along that you have expressed a view, then draw my attention to it in the usual way. Item 3, we have apologies from Councillors Beecham, Booth and Suleiman. I believe everybody else is in the room. Chair's announcements. Our next meetings are on the 17th of March and the 7th and 28th of April. And I'm not going to tempt fate by suggesting we're moving out of this room for any of them, though I expect that we will. Minutes then. Have we had the minutes of the 3rd of February? Yeah. Okay, can we agree those? They've been circulated, thank you very much. And that brings us on to planning applications, which we take in geographical area, working our way across the city. And today we're starting with North West. Item 6 then is the Wild Green Public House site on Birmingham Road. And I'll invite Karen to give any updates.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 updates. Firstly, the speaker against the application has withdrawn from speaking today, but has submitted a late representation. In summary, they're still retaining an objection on the increase of height of the building from the addition of dormer windows into the elevations, and they've got concerns that Birmingham City Council have little control over the outcome of the application and therefore have little faith in the council or the planning department. The second update for members relates to the conditions that are presented to you today within the officer report. Following publication of the report and discussion with the applicant, it's been concluded that we should be recommending the conditions that were determined at appeal and the appeal inspector's conditions that were extensively discussed and agreed at the appeal hearing. The recommended conditions are therefore to amend what's put in the officer report. Principally, the amendments are the deletion of conditions 7, 8 and 9. So those are 3 of the ecology conditions on your report, but officers feel that they're quite comfortably covered within condition 6. and that condition was on the appeal decision. We're also removing condition 23 and 24, which is the conditions restricting the age of the residents and the use of the building. But those two issues will be put within the Section 106 agreement as they were included within the legal agreement that went to appeal. So the recommendation is to remains for approval subject to the Section 106, which would now include those two, age restriction and use condition, and then subject to the conditions that are listed as amended by the appeal decision. Thank you, Chair.
Can you just go through again which conditions are changed?
So conditions 7, 8 and 9 would be removed. And then conditions 23 and 24 also removed, but put within the Section 106.
Thank you. Can I just comment before I bring members in that where a site has been previously the subject of an appeal decision after we have turned it down, then we are indeed restricted by that appeal decision, since it could be inferred that a similar decision might follow. That doesn't mean that members take it any less seriously and give any less consideration to views expressed about the application. Okay, anyone want to speak on this one? Councillor Johnson-White.
Thank you. In the application at 4.4, it states that the legal local flood authority have put in an objection. Can I just check that part of the conditions that still remain, the condition about drainage was one of those conditions, and that sort of satisfied that objection that the flood authority had?
Yeah, do you want to pick that one
thank
up?
you. Through you, Chair. So, as noted at 660 of the officer report, so we've had regard to that objection, and that wasn't something that was discussed at the appeal. And at the appeal, both the conditions that are part of that decision for the appeal, and we would now recommend to members now, they were accepted by the lead local flood authority at that time, and also by the inspector. So yes, they've had concerns on this application, but those concerns weren't something that we didn't discuss much at the appeal. And then, as I say, there is conditions that would require the details of the drainage to be submitted, and we would consult the lead local flood authority on those details as well.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's frustrating the situation we're in, given the appeal decision, but since the application before us is virtually identical to what's been before, I think if we were minded to refuse this again, what the outcome would be. So I think, and overall, we considered it rational. So I'm not happy with the application, but given the situation, we don't really have much choice but to support it on this occasion.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in? I don't think that needs a reply. That was a self-sufficient comment. Are you ready to vote on this one then? Can I see those in favour of the application? That's 11 in favour, which is everybody accounted for, so that is approved. Moving on, item 7, still in the Northwest, Greenholm Junior and Infant School. Do we have any updates?
We have one update again, Chair, regarding conditions. So with this one, condition 2 at the moment recommends a pre-commencement condition for additional drainage information. Following the publication of the report, the agent has contacted us, and they consider they've submitted sufficient information to resolve that condition. It's been discussed with Severn Trent Water. Severn Trent Water are comfortable that the information is sufficient, and therefore we're now recommending a condition that is a compliance condition. So we would recommend that it's granted approval subject to the conditions that are listed in the report, but that condition 2 is amended to the foul drainage is discharged to the foul sewer, and soakaway is discharged also to the public foul sewer, with a restriction of in regards to the litres per second, and in accordance with the submitted drainage details and the technical note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to ask a question or make a comment on this one? Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. The rest of the report's fairly short. there isn't an enormous amount of description over the visual aspect of the building being proposed. Not necessarily any further detail other than stipulating that that building will entail. So I was just wondering, from that perspective, is that normal? Would we normally expect to see more information on that?
I mean, you do always have the option to click through to the full documents, which are available on the planning portal. It didn't strike me it was any less than we would normally expect for an application of this type. Is there anything you particularly want to know that we can direct you to? Okay. Karen, if you can work, while I take Councillor Moore's question, if you can come up with a more detailed description. Councillor Moore.
So just to support Councillor's statement, there normally would be at least one image of what it is that's going to be suggested. I think given this is an uncontroversial application, it is a minor point, but I think it's, the report is brief in some of what the issues it outlines, and the lack of images does suggest that they need to be worked on for any future applications.
Mitchell?
Can you bring it on?
Don't know. Can I? Don't know that I can attach.
Are you logged into the online meeting? Hang on.
No, sorry.
I don't think matters much for this application, but for future applications, which could be controversial.
If you would like us to bring the images up, we can log into the online meeting and then get into the system and bring something up. I think the reality is that it's because it's such a minor scheme that the images aren't included, and I think it's something that probably, if it wasn't a local authority owned site, it would be delegated, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about at the end of the agenda. But I think that's the reality. But if you like it shown, we can do. It's from my recollection of looking at the building, it looks like quite a nice timber clad, what I would sort of describe as a garden building, but clearly it's a schoolroom. But it's not your normal sort of prefab building. Can you elucidate on that, or am I right?
Pretty much right, yeah. Okay. So yes, I've got an image in front of me, unfortunately, sorry, Chair. Yes, a timber clad structure. There is.
I would call that a veranda.
Veranda, that's the word. Well done. Thank you. Veranda outside as well. It's vertical cladding, grey window frames. It provides internally 2 classroom spaces and toilet facilities and a small kitchen area as well, presumably for use for the staff, and also I suppose if the children are doing painting work and the likes, I suppose. So it's replacing what is a fairly typical school porter cabin building with something that we think is an improvement, an enhancement on what's already there, and obviously more permanent structure, but not as permanent as a brick built building. So yes, it's still a timber clad proposal. But noted, I think we took an approach of bringing a light touch report because it was something that was fairly uncontroversial.
But we'll bear that in mind in the future. Thank you. Anyone?
I have that long done.
Okay.
If we have the request for any.
If anybody else wants anything, then we should be able to display it on the screen. Does anybody else have any comments on this one, or are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour? That's 11, which is everybody, so that is approved. Right, we're moving on to the east area, so we'll have a changeover at the front. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Karen. We only have the one item from the east area, which is the Birmingham Wheels site. And we do have speakers. So how it will go is that I will ask Tony for any updates. We will then hear the speaker in objection, followed by the speaker in support. Tony will then respond to any points raised in those two speeches, and then I will open it up to members. And I will hand over to Sean to manage the timekeeping and introduce our speakers when we've heard the updates. Tony.
No updates, thank you, Chair.
Oh, there we go. Sean, over to you then for the speaking segment.
First speaker is David Carter. You have 3 minutes. I will jump in just before, about 15 seconds before the end, just to alert you, but start whenever you're ready.
I'm here representing the Friends of Birmingham Wheels, a community group comprising the users and the operators of the facilities. There is an urgent need for a deferral as well as clarifications of the conditions to enable the sports facilities to be immediately reopened. I have copies of the suggested wording for members and the minutes of the meeting, if that would be helpful. Last October, we were evicted from the site without our future being addressed as per the requirements of the BDP and the MPPF. This, despite the rent being paid on time and in full throughout COVID, and the facilities being the busiest in their history, 100,000 plus users annually. We were advised that the removal of Japanese knotweed is urgent, even though it's been on the site for over 20 years. We contend that this planning application should be deferred to relocate the proposed compound elsewhere on the site. Its location on the drifting area and car park effectively prevents the operation of the sports facilities and therefore conflicts with both local and national policy. The plan at figure 2 shows the compound in the officer's report does not form part of the submitted documentation, and this is the first time we've seen this. So we must ask, where has this come from and why hasn't public consultation been carried out on it? The description of development is unclear. Is remediation works limited to works associated with the Japanese knotweed or not? Documents submitted with the planning application show engineering and remedial works far beyond this. An additional condition is suggested to address this. For clarity, the extent of remediation works permitted is restricted only to those works required to treat the Japanese knotweed. It's also important the sports and recreation facilities are protected from damage through a further condition that any works undertaken in implementing the approved scheme that damage the sport and recreation facilities should be reinstated to their condition prior to the eviction at the end of October 2021. In the light of the approach by the council, where planning and property matters have been the responsibility of the same manager, we also urge Planning Committee to approve a further resolution to clarify the expectation for future reports on planning applications. This would be that all future proposals for restoration and or redevelopment of the site should either enable consolidation and improvement of the wheeled sports facilities on site or ensure those facilities are successfully relocated to fully funded alternative facilities of at least equivalent quality with all necessary permissions in place prior to demolition of the existing facilities. This proposed resolution simply echoes the conclusions that the government inspectors reported to the BDP, and the protections in place for sport and recreation facilities are the minimum that sports venues and sports people of Birmingham Wheels should be entitled to. This position is also reflected by Sport England's objection. When several have been appointed to help find alternative site or sites, they have failed to find anything suitable. Ironically, the sites include empty warehouses very close to Wheels Park. These could not accommodate outdoor activities, do not have planning permission for noisy sports. There's been
Your time's up now. Could you stop speaking, please? Thank you. We now move on.
Thank you. The agent, Simon Croxford. Likewise, you have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know just before the end that your time's nearly up. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Simon Croxford, and I'm the Technical Director with the Engineering Consultant Tetra Tech, and we are supporting Birmingham City Council with the assessment of ground conditions and reclamation works at the wheel site. We have aided Birmingham City Council in the preparation of technical reports and planning application for the treatment of Japanese knotweed on the site. I would like to reiterate that the submitted application currently being considered is concerned with the treatment of Japanese knotweed only. Japanese knotweed is a non-native plant species and is a Schedule 9 species which is listed under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. And as such, there's an obligation on the landowner, in this case Birmingham City Council, prevent Japanese knotweed that is present on the wheel site from spreading off your property. You do not legally have to remove Japanese knotweed from your land unless it's causing a nuisance. But BCC, as a landowner, could be prosecuted for causing it to spread into the wild. The purpose of these works is to manage the current Japanese knotweed infestation and BCC's liability on the site. Surveys carried out by Japanese knotweed specialists have identified approximately 9,160 square metres of knotweed. This equates to approximately 1¼ football pitches of Japanese knotweed. The extent of the knotweed and the size of the growth indicates the knotweed has been present on site for a considerable period of time. The survey has also identified that knotweed is present predominantly in the middle of the site around the former motorcycle training area and along the boundaries to the east and the south, and it's therefore at risk of spreading off the wheel site. The proposed works under this application, again, I reiterate, are solely for the treatment of the Japanese knotweed, and proposed works would include localised removal of vegetation around the knotweed to facilitate access to the stands, removal of the Japanese knotweed growth and excavation to remove rhizomes present within the ground. This will be carried out by an experienced Japanese knotweed treatment contractor who will supervise the excavations and identify the extent of the rhizome removal. The excavated soils will then be processed on site and the residual soils will be stockpiled for future reuse. The stockpiles will be approximately 3 to 4 metres high as per industry standard and fenced off with temporary fencing. The material will be left on site and reused and reburied at a future date. The stockpile will be inspected by the contractor at periodic intervals to identify if there is any knotweed removal. This proposed methodology will provide a sustainable approach to the treatment of large stands of knotweed on site and will not require extensive use of curb or herbicides or dispose of large volume material to landfill.
15 seconds.
With regard to the compound, this can be moved to any other location on site that is required. And as was made clear within the Officers' Committee report, the application has undertaken that none of the works will lead to the demolition of any structures on site, nor will it lead to the excavation of any of the hard surface racetracks. Such applications will be subject to separate notifications or planning conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll hand back to Tony to respond to the points raised.
Thank you for those comments. So we've heard that there's nearly a hectare of Japanese knotweed on the site, and that it's a criminal offence not to treat the Japanese knotweed if there's potential that that Japanese knotweed could spread off the site. So a decision has been made to excavate the Japanese knotweed, which I understand will generally be an excavation of between 1.5 and 2 metres deep. That Japanese knotweed will then be stockpiled, processed, stockpiled, and reused on the site once it's been deemed safe to do so. And we've heard that works will not impact on the existing sports tracks that are there, that this will involve purely excavation of soft landscaping areas adjoining those sporting facilities. So those facilities won't be impacted by the proposals. In terms of the planning conditions, we can see from the report that condition 3 relates to ecological management plan and supervision by clerk of works. Condition 4 relates to an agricultural method statement and tree protection plan. Condition 5 relates to treating or washing brief effectively in terms of effects in terms of contamination. And then we've limited the activity in terms of hours of operation from 8 to 6 Monday to Friday, 8 to 1 on Saturday. We don't feel that any additional conditions are required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll open it up to members for comments and questions on this application, please. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I did have severe reservations about this application when I first saw the report, particularly the impact it would have for the existing occupiers. But I was reassured when 7.8 stated that there won't be any impact whilst this work takes place. But we've just heard from the objector that the compound proposed will impact the existing users and needs to be moved. They've asked for a deferral. Now, I believe the application suggests that can be moved, but I think we need to look into that, because if it is the case that the current proposed compound will affect Ben 7.8 Nick, that needs to be addressed.
Okay, Tony, do you have any knowledge on that?
The location of the compound isn't fixed in my understanding. The compound will be 80 metres from any boundary of the site. So it's been sited fairly centrally within the site. It's over 330 metres from the nearest residential accommodation. So in terms of the location of the compound, I think it's been sited to ensure that it's basically any processes don't impact on nearest residential accommodation. In terms of its actual siting, that's not part of this application. That has been shown in that position for informative purposes, and I'm sure we can, if necessary, that can be cited elsewhere on the site.
Good. Can I just pick up? You referred to existing occupiers. Councillor Moore, there are no existing occupiers.
The occupiers on the site is currently the case.
Victor.
My understanding, Chair, is that the site is currently vacant.
Yeah.
So the engineering works that are subject to the application don't impact on the recreational use of the site. Excuse me, there's no public discussion.
Sorry, Chair.
No, there's no.
Chair, if I'm correct, therefore existing sporting facilities in the state.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between existing sporting facilities and occupiers. So the proposed engineering works do not affect the existing sporting facilities. So they could at any point be reused if that was decided. In terms of the compound, wherever the compound goes on the site, from my experience of dealing with Japanese knotweed, the compound itself can't be within or close to where the knotweed is being excavated for fear of cross-contamination. So if the compound itself is somewhere else within the site, wherever it is, it's not going to affect existing occupiers because there aren't any. So I think for us to control the compound, which we could, I think is excessive in this case, and that's a matter for the management of the site rather than for planning. So I think planning, we're dealing with the excavation and whether it impacts on sports, and we're saying it isn't. And I think where the compound goes on the site is about the management of the site rather than about planning issues. At such point as, I'm sorry, but you cannot speak. You've had more than your 3 minutes, and you must remain quiet. Otherwise, please leave the room. If at some point there is a proposal to reuse the site for any other purposes, then that is the point at which the debate around the recreational use will be had. And that's the point at which it becomes relevant to the planning discussion. At the moment, it isn't.
Chair, since concerns have been raised about the proposed location of the compound, and if it's a matter of tissue, could that be fed back so that wherever they stick the compound doesn't have any impact and addresses the concerns that have been raised in the objections?
I think we could ask the agent to take back, if it's approved, that the siting of the compound and the layout of the compound should minimise impact on the facilities.
Chair, through you, I think that's something we could easily add as an informative.
I was going to suggest that. Are you happy for that to be added as an informative? Okay, anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Johnson-White.
Probably not a planning issue, but I just want to check something, and that is, as a result of the excavation works on various areas within the site, if there was any damages done as a result of those excavation works, are there the relevant insurances for replacement of anything that doesn't belong or isn't owned by BCC? Because I know that's one of the concerns that was raised in this document. So as a result of the contractor, whilst digging 2 metres or maybe even going further, we don't know that, and that damages something that isn't owned by BCC, because we only own the land, don't we? Then the relevant insurances presumably are in place to repair, replace, etc.
I think the insurance is a red herring. It's the responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility.
I think, that's, again, steps outside of planning responsibilities, but as a normal, contract and as a normal piece of work, then insurances should be in place. Even if they're not in place, just as a matter of common law, if somebody carries out works and damages somebody else's property, then they are liable for it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Anyone else then? Not seeing anyone else? Are you ready to vote on this? Not seeing any indications to the contrary. So can I see those in favour of the application? And that is 11 in favour, which is everybody accounted for, so that is approved. Moving on then to the south. Yeah. Zigzagging a bit and we'll end up in the city centre, but for now we're in the south. And we also have speakers on this item 9 being 81 Lordswood Road in Harborne. But first, do we have any updates, Louise?
No updates on this one, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to you then, Sean.
Thank you. Right, the first speaker we have is Helen Badusi, a local resident. You have 3 minutes, and I will jump in for about 15 seconds before the end, as with the others. Carry on whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I live at 48 Crosby Road, adjacent to the proposed development. I strongly object to the proposals. My concerns about the impact of the proposed development on my property have not been taken into account, and I'm grateful to be able to draw your attention to my concerns in person. Firstly, I'm most concerned about loss of privacy and light. The officer's report accepts that the 45-degree code will be breached on my house, but this has been given little weight in the overall planning balance exercise. The proposed replacement house will dominate the current green space and will ruin my privacy and severely restrict natural daylight into my house and garden. On the side of my house facing the proposed block 1 are 2 bedrooms and a family bathroom. Each has only 1 window in each room and each face block 1. To build a 3-storey house adjacent to my house will remove all natural light into these rooms and they will be facing a brick wall. The back of my house faces southeast and currently only receives sun along the side of the house. By adding 3 houses to the site, I will lose all sunlight, particularly in winter when the sun is much lower. At the moment, the only sun I get in my garden is coming from the area where plot 1 is planned. Secondly, I am concerned about the proposed new driveway on Lordswood Road next to a pedestrian crossing. This is a black spot for accidents where cars speed down Lordswood Road, often not stopping at the roundabout. The entrance of Crosby Road is proposed to be enlarged and will require removal of the current pedestrian dropped curb. What will happen to this dropped curb? The end of Crosby Road is frequently used by the local blind school and children crossing to get to the primary school. And thirdly, the proposal, in my opinion, does not complement the existing character of the area. The contemporary design, which includes high, steep gables, is totally different to the more traditional properties typical of the area. The drawing at 1.4 is not an accurate scale. My house is a small 2-storey house. Compare that to the 3-storey house being proposed. At paragraph 1.5, there is no mocked-up photo of how plot 1 will look on Crosby Road adjacent to my property, whereas at 1.4, there is a vision of Lordswood Road. The committee need to understand what the development on Crosby Road will look like next to my house and show a clearer idea of how imposing it will be on my property and the effect it will have to the daylight in the 3 rooms to the side of my house. No visit was made by a planning officer to assess the proposals from my perspective. The developer has not been in my house or my garden and therefore does not understand how this will impact on my daylight and privacy. I question how the decision has been reached without anyone attending the site and seeing for themselves. I do not agree that the proposal should be approved and respectfully request that the planning committee visit the site and my property before making a decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Peter Ike, the agent. Yeah, you have 3 minutes, and again, I'll jump in before the end.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The proposed scheme before you today is a conclusion of a 3-year journey which followed a detailed pre-application submission and extensive consultation which continued throughout the planning process, involving your planning officer, urban design, highway officers, local residents and responding to numerous consultative responses. The final scheme presented represents a well-considered, cohesive design proposal that addresses the issues raised during consultations, revising the scheme from initial proposals of 9 apartments over 3 floors, reducing the density, scale, height and mass, resulting in a reduced number of dwellings to 3 separate, high-quality family houses, each with dedicated car parking provision. As a result, the amended proposals are more in keeping and appropriate to the immediate typology of large family houses set within their own grounds with front and rear amenity. Private amenity space for the dwellings on site has increased from the original submission. The scheme strongly relates and reinforces the frontage of a corner site, replacing a single dormer bungalow poorly sited to the rear of the plot, with no rear garden of note. It provides new houses to front Crosby Road and Lordswood Road, following the distinct building lines that exist. New boundary walling and railings to the site are proposed to define the boundary to the public realm, whilst strengthening security and privacy, with improved substantial planting and trees behind the boundary. This in turn enhances the existing natural habitat that surrounds the existing site. Additional tree planting is proposed to improve the ecology and encouragement of wildlife and biodiversity on the site, as highlighted in the planning officer's report and by the landscape tree consultant. The choice and style of the high-quality building materials and contemporary aesthetics has been carefully selected to respect the building styles and materials local to the area. The design of Plot 1 has been carefully designed to ensure there is no material impact on the neighbouring properties in Crosby Road, with the height of the building no higher than the immediate neighbouring house, and considerably shorter than the other surrounding properties facing Crosby Road. Design changes through the planning process were undertaken to reduce the impact of the new dwellings on the immediate neighbours. Setting back at the site is subservient to the main frontages of the houses and lowering the roof ridges and eaves. Generally, the overall layout and design principles fully comply with the planning technical standards and guidance for separation distance in residential development and avoid overlooking and overshadowing as evidence. The proposed new dwellings exceed the minimum standards to provide an excellent high-quality accommodation with integral covered cycle parking, car parking and secure bin storage. The impact of the 3 dwellings on the existing road network can be seen to be demonstrably negligible. The proposed dwellings are an entirely sustainable reuse of the existing site, and we recommend the planning officer's report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Louise, do you want to come back on the points raised in those speeches?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the 2 speakers. Just picking up some of the points from the objector to the scheme. As the applicant has explained, we've been in significant discussions about the development of this site over the last couple of years. The scheme was first submitted as an apartment block, which we were not comfortable with in terms of its context and the relationship with the buildings next door and the general character. So we've worked hard with the applicant to come up with a scheme for 3 family dwellings, 1 detached and a pair of semi-detached on Lawswood Road, to get to a point that we're comfortable with in terms of its design, but most importantly, the impact on the adjacent residents. In terms of the specific points raised by the objector, the 45-degree code, that's in relation to the impact on windows to the rear of their existing property, so at number 48, and the impact by plots 2 and 3. If members look at 1.6, which sets out the layout of the site, that's the 2 dwellings, the pair of semi-detached dwellings on Lawswood Road. Although there is a breach of the 45-degree from the window at the back of the existing property, it is at a distance of 14 metres away, which is quite a common distance and quite a common relationship where we have houses at right angles to each other at the back of the property. And we don't consider that that is going to cause significant issues in terms of overlooking. It is at an angle rather than directly window to window at the back of the property. Just in terms of the character, we've worked hard, as I said, with the applicant to come up with a scheme of good quality, good size, well-designed new properties, sited in accordance with the two building lines on Lordswood Road and Crosby Road to follow those through, picking up the scale of the existing properties. So there is a mixture of scales in the area, including just further down Lordswood Road, some 3-storey Victorian properties. It's picking up on some of the style in terms of the front elevation, the gable roofs that we're proposing. Brick-built properties, which again fits in with the local character. In terms of the impact on Crosby Road and in terms of the relationship of the building to the objector's property, just above the site layout at 1.6, you can see that section there, those elevations which show the existing property and that relationship. And we've been looking carefully at how close it comes to the boundary, but also reducing the scale. So you can see the part of the house proposed next door is at 2 stories set down, and then it raises to 3 stories further away. So again, we think that relationship works well. It follows through with the eaves height and the ridge height of the adjacent building at number 48. In terms of the windows, the impact on the windows which are on the side of the objector's property, we have looked again carefully at that. It would appear that that property was extended. There was a permission back in 2006, and they built a side and rear extension, and some of those windows have been put on at that point. One of them is a bathroom window. That's obviously not classed as a habitable room window. There are 2 other windows, one to a bedroom and one to a kitchen, but they also have windows to the rear as well, so it's not the sole source of light and outlook. There are those windows at the back. There is one remaining bedroom window on the side at the first floor, which is more significantly affected. That doesn't have a secondary window. That is the sole window into that bedroom. It's slightly set back from the side boundary, as is the proposed new house, and there are no windows on the side elevation of the new house, so there's no impact in terms of overlooking. It's more a question of outlook and sunlight and daylight. The new house doesn't extend any further back than number 48, so there will still be an opportunity for some daylight into that room and also outlook at an angle from the bedroom. So we don't think that in terms of the impact on that window alone, that those would be grounds to refuse the application. We think that the plot sits well in terms of the building line, and it's quite common to have that relationship with houses along one particular road where there might be windows on the side of existing properties. I think that was everything in terms of the planning issues raised. I was just going to bring in my colleague in terms of the highway impact.
Yes, this has been a scheme that's been debated for quite some time, and you'll see the age of the application reference. And so the officers have been involved with a number of iterative alternative layout plans from my point to ensure that the practicality of car parking on site and turning manoeuvres can be undertaken without prejudicing the road safety of pedestrians and vehicles. It's noted that, of course, that the proposal does widen the existing vehicle crossover on Crosby Road, which, because of the nature of Crosby Road, I would suggest could actually be modified without planning consent anyway. However, the proposal clearly shows that majority of that existing intention of a pedestrian block curve on the development side of Crosby Road would become part of the wider footway crossing to the proposed development. That doesn't mean it's unsafe, it just means that that is part of the way that that element of curbside would be formatted. There are no tactile pavings there to advise anyone partially sighted of the fact that that is a defined crossing point. So therefore, merely merging that with the proposed widened footway crossing, which would be the case without this development, would not necessarily be a strength to resist. Certainly, the Lordswood Road elevation does introduce a new potential conflict point, a new crossing there for access for two properties. The applicants have worked in terms of detail, given the iterative process of the layout on that frontage to prove that there would be a practical turning area for the prescribed number of on-site parking spaces. And that limits the location that the proposed new access can go in relationship with the pedestrian refuge. It would be necessary to adjust the position of the pedestrian refuge to ensure that highway safety is not compromised, and that would be under a highways agreement. There seems to be scope for that to be achieved without compromising the ability of historic existing accesses on the opposite side of that road to function correctly. So with those provisos, there are no overall reasons to resist. Noting the conditions on the report, if members were mindful to support this, I would advise a construction management plan, including a demolition management plan, would also be included.
Thank you. Always very keen on construction management plan, so can we add that to the list of conditions? So that's construction and demolition management. Okay, anyone wish to speak or ask questions on this one? Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I welcome the change to family dwellings from the previous application of the that is welcome for the site. That's about as far as I can approve of the proposal. I remain wholly unconvinced that the style of the proposed housing is in keeping with the character of the local area. I think the image at 1.6 is fairly adequately demonstrates how out of keeping it is with the properties immediately adjacent. The area of Lordswood and the surrounding Harborne area is Victorian heritage housing with bay windows, various facades, and the kind of fairly brutal flat facades of this proposal of those two housing. Nothing is completely out of keeping with the area. The proposed new drop curve onto Lordswood Road, knowing the area very well, Lordswood Road being a very busy bus route and a key commuter route in and out of the city for Harborne area, Winton, up into Bearwood and the surrounding areas. I think that drop curve that close to what is a very busy and very tight, dangerous island is, again, a fairly major concern. And for those reasons, I won't be supporting this application.
Anyone else wish to speak on this one? Do you want to come back on those points, or do we need to bring Paul back in?
I'll pick up the point about the design.
Okay.
Yeah. So not trying to repeat myself in terms of the range of different house types and characters in the immediate vicinity, but this is obviously quite a contemporary approach, but that's not necessarily a negative approach. I think that if you look at the image on 1.5, you can see in terms of the building scale and its articulation, the use of the gabling, the use of the brick materials, the setback of the two-storey element behind the three-storey element gives some good articulation. We're comfortable with that, and our urban designers are. They think that it's a good approach to that corner, and we're losing one property and we're gaining two more, so there's a total of three, and that obviously weighs in its favour in terms of the need for housing in the area. We actually think that it is a good, high-quality proposal.
Paul, do you want to come back in on the drop curb and island relationship?
Submitting proposed access on the road. Lordswood Road will show you, in terms of street view, the existing activity of establishing the brake crossings, which are not too far away from the proposal. So whilst I appreciate the concerns raised in terms of the creation of a user, with regards to the provision of adequate pedestrian visibility, I would suggest that there would be insufficient reason to resist the location that's shown on the plan in front of you, in regards to its character and proximity to the roundabout. I don't think that would necessarily be strong enough to resist this proposal.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment or ask a question? Or are you ready to vote on this one? Can I see those in favour of the application? Seven. Those against? Three. And those abstaining. Okay, so that's 7 in favour, 3 against and 1 abstention, so that is approved. Thank you. We move on. Heading further south within the south area to land at West Longbridge, to the west and north of the A38, Bristol Road South, which is the former MG factory site. Louise, do we have any updates?
No updates on this one, Chair. I was just going to do a quick summary just for members' benefit. So an outline application down at Longbridge West for up to 350 dwellings. It's a site that's allocated for residential in the area action plan and the BDP, so it's fully in compliance with that allocation. Although it's an outline, we do have an illustrative master plan and a parameters plan, which shows a good mix of dwellings and dwelling types. Significant new on-site open space, particularly around the reconfigured River Ray, linking into cycle paths and the pedestrian network. In terms of the section 106, there will be 20% on-site affordable housing, obviously all the significant open space, and then an off-site contribution to affordable housing towards BMHT of £1.42 million. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think the map at the end of the report, it makes it very clear where the site is for anyone who hasn't yet located it. Okay, any comments or questions? Councillor Moore.
Chair, I don't have an issue with the application, particularly as it's outlined at this stage. But just in relation to 6.7 and the concerns around parking, obviously, is the view that we need to be very clear. The best way to achieve that is to ensure there's adequate off-street parking in the first place. And quite often I find is that the council's parking policies are not sufficient to address that. I've had a number of new estates built in my ward, and off-street parking is been provided, but we quite often find that it's not sufficient to meet the needs of those households. And quite often you will find multiple cars having to park half on the pavement, half off, restricting access. Now, those are very small estates, so that is manageable, though it is a nuisance. This is a much larger estate, as I think it's talking almost up to 400 houses. I think, it's 400 metres long. I think it's 350 houses. So I do think we need to, the best way to achieve that when we get to reserve matters is to ensure that there is sufficient parking, if that has been flagged as a concern, particularly by the fire service. If we don't provide sufficient car parking, then it will end up on the street and it is going to cause the problems that have been highlighted there.
Anybody else want to come in? No? Do you want to pick that point up? It is, after all, an outline application.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so it is an outline, so it will be at that detailed reserved matters stage that we'll get the details of the dwelling types and the sizes and what those requirements would be in terms of the SPD. But yeah, that's obviously noted and something we need to be very aware of, and obviously our transportation colleagues will as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be minuted. Anyone else on this one? No? If you're ready to vote then, can I see those in favour? That's 11 in favour, which is everybody, so that is agreed. Staying at the southern boundary of the city, we move on to the former North Worcestershire Golf Club, and this is where Councillor Johnson White will be leaving us for the item. A placard outside the site. Are there any updates?
No, no updates on this one, Chair.
I'm informed that on paragraph 1.5, there's a slight error in that the second and third bullet points where it says social rent and shared rent, shared ownership, they should be the other way around. So bullet point 3 is shared ownership. Bullet point 2 is shared ownership, and bullet point 3 should read social rent. So all the figures are right. It's just that those two headings are just the wrong way around. It doesn't impact on the report or the conclusions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to whoever spotted that. Always better to have it spotted before a decision is made. Okay then, anyone wish to speak on this one? I was expecting to have speakers, but we don't have, so do any members wish to raise anything? No? In that case, having studied the report and heard that point, are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour then? That's 10 in favour, which is everybody, so that is approved. Thank you. Thanks, Louise. That's the end of your section. Can we have Councillor Johnson White retrieved, please? And Nick's got just 2 applications for us for the city centre. The first of which is the Phase 2 public realm at land bounded by Paradise Circus, Queensway, and the surroundings. So it includes Chamberlain Square and Paradise Street. Nick, do we have any updates?
There are no updates, Chair, although I've just noticed a typo at the very start of the report at 1.1, but I think the intent is clear to be seen. Is this the?
Okay, delete the, and it's this application. Okay then, if there are no updates, does anyone wish to comment on this one? Somewhere we all expect to use in the future? Nobody? Okay. Again, you've had the report, you've had the opportunity to study it. Nick's corrected the typo. Are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour? That's 11 in favour. That is then unanimously approved. And our last one for today is the Lawson Street car park in Aston, which again, many of us are familiar with. Updates?
Yes, Chair, so there are 3 updates. Firstly, an amendment to condition 16, which requires a further noise assessment, and it's just to change the trigger to prior to occupation rather than prior to above ground works. And the reason for this is in response to Reg Services noting that there are some high level plants on adjacent buildings that may need to be accounted for in the survey, and that further low level assessment wouldn't capture that. So therefore the developer would undertake that once the frame is up so they can get to sufficient height. The second is that the Health and Safety Executive's consultation response regarding the fire statement has not been received. Therefore, it's proposed to amend the resolution or the recommendation of 8.1 to read approval of planning application 2021/09215/PA, subject to either confirmation of no objection from the Health and Safety Executive or no response being received by Monday the 28th of February 2022, which is after the expiry of their consultation period. And update number 3 is to add a further condition requiring the submission of a construction employment plan. It's a very lengthy condition, so I don't propose to read it out in full unless members would like me to do so. But obviously that targets new starters, so that's school, university, college leavers, the unemployed or those at risk of becoming so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Stanford?
I want to welcome the biodiversity again, particularly enjoyed there's a bat box, bird box, and an insect tower. It's good to see how that's all of that in the application.
It is actually a requirement now. So, no, for biodiversity net gain. I mean, we've tended to move away from bird boxes, bat boxes and hedgehog gaps in fences to expecting developers to have a plan. But you can expect to see more of that.
Yeah, I did have to Google insect tower, by the way, Chair. It's a new one on me.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to note the loss of a car park. One in good condition, as far as I was concerned, and very well used. So disappointing that we keep losing these in the city centre, given that there's still a need for people to drive.
But the only comment is it's city council car park, not a general use car park, of course.
I thought it was pay and display.
Oh, is it pay and display as well? Oh, sorry, I stand correct.
Those of us who've used it.
I know most of the staff used it, but.
Yeah, it was mostly used as overflow, but yes, it is actually a public, was actually a public pay and display. Anybody else with any comments or questions? No? In that case, are you ready to vote for the last time today? Can I see those in favour? That's 10 in favour, those against, 1 against. So that is still approved. Thank you very much. We move on then to policy reports. And Sean's been doing some tidying.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's two items for you to consider. One is the planning code of practice, and the second is the scheme of delegation. The changes to the planning code of practice are to take out and tidy up some of the changes we made as a result of COVID, some of the things around meetings there. Changes as a result of changing officers' titles, few clarifications, and an amendment to the public speaking protocol. And that's the most significant amendment. We've had a couple of occasions where an objector has registered a right to speak at the last minute. The applicant hadn't done that. We've had to consider whether to make an exception, and in those cases, the chair has. And so what is being proposed here is that there's where an objector registers a right to speak, there's an automatic right of reply for the applicant or agent, even if they haven't already registered. And it's just to cover that eventuality. I think it's done with the on the basis that enabling both parties to speak and to put their views is often helpful to the debate and enables a more rounded consideration. So that's the main change there. Before I moved on to the scheme of delegation, does anybody have any questions or queries about the planning code of practice changes? Thank you. In terms of the scheme of delegation, the changes are set out in detail in Appendix 2 with deletions and additions clearly shown. But they're listed for ease at paragraph 3.3. Again, they're all fairly minor. The one which we referred to earlier is at point 3, which is at the moment even minor sort of education proposals, such as the one we saw today, would have to be referred to committee simply if there is an objection. And what we're doing here is saying that if it's a mining development, we would treat it the same way as any other mining development and introduce the thresholds that apply across the board. So that's the proposal there. So even if it's a minor and it generates a lot of interest, then that would be brought to committee. But if it isn't, then it would be capable of being dealt with delegated. Clearly, the call-in is still there, even for those type of applications. And point 4 is to allow delegated decisions where we need a Section 106 agreement or where there's a unilateral undertaking to secure biodiversity net gain provision, because that's going to be more often, and it's going to be a fairly straightforward and standard 106. And so if that's the case, then this would allow us to do that as a delegated item if there are no other reasons to report it to committee. So I think overall they're all fairly minor, but if you have any queries or any points, please let me know.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any issue with the changes being made to the scheme delegation, but in terms of tidying up, there are still some references to director of growth in there. Whilst that's been done in the code of practice, it's not done in the scheme delegation in some places. So just point that out. That's just a very minor.
Yeah. The planning bit in there, the actual scheme of delegation is much wider because it covers the full range. And I think those points are going to be tidied up when the whole thing's been. But yes, the point isn't lost. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Are we happy otherwise on those two documents? Somebody at least nodding would help. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Straker-Wells.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we move on then to the Civico building control charging scheme, which is set out in the report. Pete, you're a director, aren't you?
I'm the director of Civico.
So puts you outside for this item. Do we formally have to vote on this, or do we note it?
Yeah, you vote on it.
Okay, so we do actually have to formally approve this document. Some of the statutory responsibilities for building control do sit with us, especially this one. We haven't got anybody to introduce the report, though we have an officer willing to answer questions. But it's quite straightforward. We last did it 2 years ago, so many of you will have been here at the time. And the case is set out in the report for an 8% increase, given inflationary pressures. And it's set out at 5.2 what the increased building control fees will be. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? In that case, are you ready to vote on the proposals set out at point 2 in the report, which appears first on your agendas? I see those in favour. That's 10 in favour, so that's unanimously approved. Thank you. Where are we? So we're now on to any other urgent business that won't wait till the next meeting. I've got one item, but does anyone else have anything? No? In that case, I'll go on to my item, which is to note that today is Sean's last meeting with us. He doesn't quite escape till the end of March, but won't be here for the meeting in March. As you know, he came here for 6 months in the interim role 2 years ago.
It's been a longer 6 months.
And has been a huge support to the committee and to me as chair over that time, helping us through some difficult times, our PAS review. He's brought his experience from other authorities to help us come out stronger and with clearer processes, the last of which you've heard tidied up today. So thank you. Couldn't have done any of this without you for the last 2 years. We may get stroppy at times. I may get stroppy at times, but we really do appreciate.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words. I have to say that, you know, in terms of stroppiness, you're nowhere near the stroppiest accounts committee I've ever had to deal with. I have very long chalk. But thank you for working positively with me and with the officers. And I think the officers and members now have a stronger relationship going forward, and I hope that continues. But yeah, it's been an interesting 6 months, I think.
Gareth, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, Chair, just to echo your comments really. So it's been great to have Sean with us for a very long 6 months. So we're in a much stronger position as a planning committee now as a result, and it's been useful to have his outside and fresh perspective on a lot of the issues we've been grappling with. So I think he leaves us in a much better place, and hopefully that will continue moving forward when he eventually does move on.
Thank you very much.
And we have got you something to remember us by.
That's most unexpected, and thank you very much.
Right, that just leaves item 17, the authority to chair and officers to act on behalf of the committee before the next meeting. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you all very much.